In John Berger's Ways of Seeing, he talks about the relation of words and images. At one point, he reproduces this picture and says, "This is a landscape of a cornfield with birds flying out of it. Look at it for a moment, then turn the page." When you turn the page, you find the same picture reproduced with this caption underneath. This is the last picture that Van Gogh painted before he killed himself. Berger comments, "It is hard to define exactly how the words have changed the image, but undoubtedly they have. The image now illustrates the sentence." Berger is right, and it's worthwhile thinking about how the words have changed the picture. I can only speak for myself here. Different people will respond in different ways, but I hope you'll find an overlap between my response and your own. The sentence puts the painting in proximity to death, and that makes it appear more sombre than before. What I notice is that the darkness of the sky seems more oppressive after reading the sentence. The birds, the crows, seem more ominous. In the light of Van Gogh's suicide, the paths through the field seem to lead nowhere. Instead, they come to look like symbols of futility and inescapability. Berger is right to say that the picture comes to illustrate the sentence. It is as if the painting were a prophecy of the death to come. At this point, I should add a couple of caveats. Firstly, there is some debate now about whether Van Gogh actually committed suicide. It may have been an accident or something else. If it was not suicide, then the sense of prophecy is simply a projection on my part, prompted by the sentence. Secondly, art historians are no longer certain that this is the last painting that Van Gogh made before his death. If it's not the last painting, then it loses the proximity to death that gives it such poignance. Nevertheless, when Berger wrote his book in 1972, he wrote what was generally believed to be true about the painting. We can push his thought experiment further by adding a caption that is completely untrue, like this. This is the first picture that Van Gogh painted after the birth of his child. Van Gogh had no children. This is completely untrue. However, and curiously, when I look at the sentence and image together, I find that once again the sentence alters the appearance of the painting and the painting comes to illustrate the sentence. Again, speaking for myself, the picture seems brighter, more buoyant. The ripe corn speaks of fertility and abundance. Things rise upward, as if exhilarated. Continuing the experiment, I can add a sentence that has nothing to do with either the painting or Van Gogh. The train was late again. Once more, the painting is changed by the sentence. I find myself thinking about the stillness and emptiness of the scene. This is a place where nothing happens, and this is the boredom of waiting for a delayed train. I can even add someone else's words as a caption, in this case part of a poem by Anne Bronte. But I would rather be the hare that, crouching in its sheltered lair, must start at every sound, that forced from cornfields waving wide is driven to seek the bare-hilled side, or in the tangled copse to hide, than be the hunter's hound. While the last caption slowed the painting to a standstill, this makes the landscape rush, the stalks of corn bending in the wind. There is nowhere to hide here, and the choice of path adds to a sense of anxiety. I could go on, but I'm sure you get the idea. The painting will not respond to every sentence, but there are an awful lot to which it will. We normally come across images accompanied by text of one sort or another, and Berger's general point is that the text tends to dominate imagery, tends to turn an image into an illustration. And while this may be generally true, I want to look at a couple of paintings that don't follow this pattern. The first is Poussin's painting of Arcadian shepherds, which Erwin Panofsky wrote about in 1936. The painting shows a small group of shepherds gathered around a tomb, while one of them reads the inscription on the front, Et in Arcadia ego. Panofsky says that this is not a classical quotation, and it doesn't completely make sense. Literally translated, it would read, and in Arcadia I. I what? The reader might wonder. Panofsky claims that the sentence is missing a verb, and to make it make sense, the reader and viewer has to supply the missing verb by looking at the visual context and trying to guess what verb would make most sense in that context. Poussin was not the first artist to use that phrase. In Guercino's painting, it appears below a large skull, and Panofsky argues that the words are spoken by Death himself to the shepherds. The phrase might then be translated as, even in Arcadia, I, death, am there. In Poussin's painting, however, there is no skull, and Panofsky argues that the words are read as if spoken by the inhabitant of the tomb, rather than death. In this case, the phrase might be translated as, I too lived in Arcadia. Although we might disagree about how best to translate the phrase, the crucial point is that the words are the same in Guercino and Poussin, but their meaning changes and is determined by the picture rather than the other way around. The other artist I want to look at is Ed Ruscha, who has painted words throughout his career. Often it is a single word presented in isolation where the lack of context tends to drain the word of its meaning. The painting process gets its own back on language. Instead of waiting dumbly around until some words come along to explain it, the picture robs, or at least wears down, the meaning of the words. Ruscha has also made a series of paintings of mountains with banal phrases superimposed on them. In these works, the gap between words and images, which is present in Guercino and Poussin, becomes an unbridgeable gulf. We cannot use the words to make sense of the picture, why a mountain for instance, nor can we use the picture to make sense of the words, why April. These paintings may seem like an attack on meaning and a dead end, but the separation of words and images also contains a promise of freedom, and the act of putting together words and images in this way is like a dream. If you found this video interesting, please like and subscribe.